A very warm welcome to all of you. This is Business Today, your weekly business roundup brought to you exclusively on Channel I. And let's start our program for tonight with a quote by Robert Kiyosaki, where he said, "Do not let the fear of losing be greater than the excitement of winning." So do not let the fear of failure overtake you, as it may close many, many avenues of success. And with that in mind, we will start our program for tonight, and let's move on to Business Personality segment. Right, today we got a multi-skilled business personality who has held many key positions in the corporate sector, and it is best that we first connect with the introduction clip before we meet our guest.
Dinesh Virat Kohli is a former chairman of Commercial Bank of Ceylon and the Employees Trust Fund of Sri Lanka and director DFCC Bank. Virat Kohli was the chairman of the government-appointed committee to review the scheme of banking and finance companies consolidation. Mr. Virat Kohli currently sits on several public and non-listed companies including Hatton National Bank PLC, Ceylon Tobacco PLC, Haymas Holdings PLC and GlaxoSmithKline Sri Lanka. He is a council member of the Employers Federation of Ceylon and the Sri Lanka Institute of Directors. Virat Kohli is the chairman of the National Human Resource Development Council of Sri Lanka and an advisor to the Ministry of National Policies and Economic Affairs. He also co-chairs the Colombo City Development Committee and a member of the CIMA Asia Pacific Advisory Body. He is an author of 6 books and is a well-known business writer.
All right, and here is Mr. Dinesh Virat Kohli, and he is currently the chairman of National Human Resource Development Council of Sri Lanka, and also he serves as a board director in several public quoted companies. A very, very warm welcome to you.
Good evening, and thank you very much for inviting me for this
All
program.
right, so you have been holding senior positions in many diversified sectors, from banking sector to pharmaceutical sector, to human resource management. So how has this journey been to be in several sectors?
Yeah. I don't know whether you have heard of Jack Welch. When we grew up, everything was about Jack Welch.
Okay.
And his famous book, Winning, was actually the Bible at that time, in the early late 1990s and the 2000s. And he had these 2 famous quotes. One was, when the rate of change inside exceeds the rate of change outside, the end is inside. Okay. And the second quote was, whatever you are assigned, over deliver and never focus on the next job. Mm-hmm. And as a professional, I'm an accountant. Yeah. And I come from a legal family. My great grandfather, grandfather and father were lawyers. Mm-hmm. And when I was young, I wanted to be a lawyer, but my mother said, enough of lawyers and do something else. So that's how I got into accountancy, because there again at that time there were very few courses, unlike today. Right. It was either accountancy or getting into the university. Mm-hmm. And we had the JVP insurrection at that time. Mm-hmm. So I thought the best option was to get into and do CIMA. Mm-hmm. So I started as an accountant, and then as you know, finance is the language of business. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a very good foundation for any profession. Right. And to move into any role. Mm-hmm. And when I got bored, because I felt there were too many accountants, and my uncle who was in HR suggested that I should move into HR. Right. And in early 1990s, I left to England and joined University of Leicester and did a 2-year program, and I specialized in HR. And then since then, I have not looked back.
Great. So you're currently the chairman of National Human Resource Development Council of Sri Lanka. Can you talk a little bit about its role? Yeah,
the National Human Resource Council it falls under the purview of the Prime Minister. Mm-hmm. It's the apex body for skills in the country. So I have about 17 secretaries sitting in the council. Right. It's one of the most powerful councils in the country. But for some reason, in the last couple of years, it has not been very productive and not actually played the role it should have. And in the last 2 years, the Prime Minister has put a lot of emphasis that we come up with the required policy interventions.
Right.
So in 2016, we ran the first ever Sri Lanka Human Capital Summit, and we looked at 3 or 4 sectors. One was tourism, services, technology, and financial services. We got some of the best experts down, and then based on their recommendations, we came up with 5 interventions. They said for Sri Lanka to become a middle-income country and sustain the required income levels, that we should focus on improving the quality of higher education. So that was one recommendation. Then the second recommendation was to make the tertiary education relevant to our country.
Right.
And the third one was to invest more on early child education, because I think we invest only 0.03% of our GDP on ECD.
Right.
Right. And then
which is very important.
Yes, and then also the gender diversity, because as you know, the female participation is only about 36%. And then finally, the labor market reforms that we need. As you know, hiring casual employees is a huge issue here. Time sharing, work sharing is not even heard of here.
Yes. Right, so our labor force is more focused on technical and theoretical side of it than the practical side. And a common issue we face across the industry is lack of soft skills. Why is this?
Yeah, I would say that I think most of our programs that are offered currently don't teach young people to think, to solve problems, or how to manage a team.
Yeah.
So I think it's important that we invest a little bit more, instead of just delivering knowledge, to deliver skills. So that I think requires a combination of training, exposure, as well as knowledge. And in HR we call it competence. Right? So I think a lot of the programs that we offer don't actually focus on the skill piece, as well as delivering the required behaviors that we need. And we focus a lot on knowledge, and a lot of our young people actually focus on collecting certificates, then focusing on actually acquiring skills.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember when I was chairman Commercial Bank, we advertised for a management trainee, for management trainees, and there were 2,500 applications, and we had a challenge in selecting the people because they had 4 or 5 qualifications, but they actually didn't demonstrate the competencies and the behaviors that we wanted.
Yes. Right. So also, as you mentioned, we see a situation where we see a skills mismatch.
Yeah.
And do you think our current education system is catering to what it requires actually? And do you think that our current education system is capable of producing the labor force that the labor market is demanding?
Okay. The biggest problem we have is I think 350,000 young people join the education system,
right,
and about 85% sit for O-levels. Then about another 60% get into A-levels,
right,
and out of that, I think about half qualify to enter the university, but only about 7.5%. That's for every 100 students who enter the education system, only about 7.5% actually enters the higher education system. And out of that, 50% of the courses are in arts.
right.
Now, if you look at countries like Malaysia and Korea and Singapore, for example, 50% of our courses are in arts, only about 20% are in engineering. Now in Singapore, it's about 60% is in engineering and sciences,
right,
and arts are only about 20%.
Right.
So the problem we have, we are not creating job-ready people. So, and the jobs are being created in the private sector. So this is why I think in 2016, the Prime Minister came up with this concept called a future-ready workforce.
Right.
He engaged the private sector and he told them, you're always complaining that we are not producing the right skills. He said, now tell me, what are the skills you need by 2020?
Yes.
I'll make sure that the university system delivers these skills.
Right.
So the National Human Resource Council is actually focused on that, in delivering a future-ready workforce.
Right. So as an HR specialist, how can we reorient our education system to address these concerns?
Yeah. One, I think the curriculum needs to change. Right? Now, in order to do that, the private sector needs to be engaged. I don't think the public sector can deliver that. And I think we are focusing too much on the supply side than on the demand side. Because again, the public sector, every year you have 20,000 people retiring. Right? About 150,000 vacancies are created in the private sector. So actually the jobs are in the private sector. So you need to engage with the private sector, find out what type of skills you need. Right? For example, if you talk to the big companies, they will tell you this is the type of business we will be in 20 or 5 years time. So the university system must gear up for that and deliver the skills that the private sector needs.
Right. All right. And you also spoke about gender diversity. So can you talk about the importance of gender diversity and the importance of attracting women employees into the labor workforce?
Yeah. So
force.
Yeah. So I have some stats here. The female workforce participation is only 36%.
Right.
And if you are to
only 36%.
If you are to benefit from the young workforce we have, we need to get these females into the workforce. Right now, if you look at this, out of this total amount, about 12.5% are professional women, and these are people who are qualified, and we cannot afford to keep them at home. We need to plug into that talent pool. Now, how do we do it? Now, other countries, they do work sharing. Then, for example, you will come in the morning, do work from 8 to 12, and somebody will take over after that. Now, that never happens because our system does not allow it. Now, I know, for example, some audit firms, especially reports and all, they send it out to females who are at home, who edit these reports and then send it back. So they have created a talent pool where, for example, when they want reports and all edited, they will send it out there, and these people staying at home will make money. Right? So we need to find new ways of actually tapping into that talent pool. Now, for example, a lot of companies don't have freshers. Right? So if you want to get this, if you want to increase this participation at least to 50%, I think we need to be innovative, and also the labor reforms. And we need to have that labor reform that we badly need.
Also, we see a trend of foreign labor being hired, especially from countries like China, India, and other Asian countries. Why is this in a situation where we also face an issue of unemployment in the country itself? Why do we hire foreign labor?
Yeah. Now the challenge we have is now, for example, the construction sector needs 1 million people. The tourism sector needs 300,000 people, right? Now, a lot of our young people prefer to drive a trishaw. We have 1.2 million young people driving trishaws, and the average age there is 35. And when we did our stats, we found that about 25% are graduates. I mean, it's a tragedy.
25%?
Yeah, of that 1.2 million are graduates. And I mean, as taxpayers, we are actually investing in these people, and then we are getting them to drive trishaws. So I think the government came up with a strategy, like in Singapore now you can't drive a taxi unless you're a retiree. So I think we need to come up with options, and we have to motivate these young people to actually get into industry. Now the government has a special program where we are actually working with tourism to actually have training programs for these guys. So that we tell them what the industry can offer. They do road shows, and we're trying to motivate them to come into industry. Because we can't afford to have these young people driving trishaws.
Definitely.
Right? And the importing labor, if we have to do it, we'll have to do it. We have no choice, because we need the growth that this country badly needs. For example, if we have to attract the investment, the FDIs that we need, last year we got only $1 billion. Now we are focused on doubling that in 2017. We need to attract top quality FDI. To do that, we need the skills. So in the short term, if we don't have the skills, then we'll need to import. But we need to have the safeguards. The government again is coming up with an option where they're going to have a quality assurance board where all applications are sent there. They will review it, and they will then say, for example, we know that the tourism industry needs 300,000. The immigration controller won't know that. So this application will come to the National Human Resource Development Council or body like that, and we will give the approval for them to hire them, say for a year or whatever, until we build the bench strength that the country needs.
Right. So taking a step further, how can Sri Lanka be globally competent in providing and supplying labor and exporting labor?
The National Human Resource Development Council and the Ceylon Chamber is working on an initiative. We have 1.2 million expats living overseas. When we look at their profiles, it's amazing. And a lot of them are top quality experts. And we are trying to see whether a lot of these guys have apartments and they have invested in this country. They have either retired recently or in retirement. And these are people who can actually contribute in a big way to our country. So we are trying to see whether for short-term assignments, whether we can tap into that talent pool. So the Immigration Department, the National Human Resource Development Council and the Ceylon Chamber is working together to try and see whether we can work with that expatriate group.
Right, and you are also a council member of the Colombo City Development Committee. Can you talk about the progress of the project and the expected outcome?
I think this committee was appointed by the Prime Minister when there was a huge garbage crisis. And Mrs. Rosie Sinanayaka and I and Mr. Chandra Shafter and a few others are actually doing this. So we have addressed the garbage issue, and our second assignment was to beautify the city. So we have embarked on a project. We are redoing all the roundabouts. Hopefully by the 15th of December, most of the roundabouts will be redone in the city. Right, and then we are looking at bringing in smart lampposts, which will have an eye, which will have Wi-Fi plus advertising space. Right, and then in addition to make sure the streets are being cleaned, a couple of months ago they were cleaning the streets maybe once or twice a day. Now we made it 4, and the garbage collection is happening well. And in addition, the dengue, we have a special campaign to actually control dengue. As you know, 6 months ago it was really bad, and I think in the last 3-4 months, due to continuous fogging and continuous inspection, we have been able to bring it down under control. So despite the rains, it has not spiked.
Right. In a conversation like this, we cannot leave out the banker in you, as you've been heading Sri Lanka's top banks at one point. So in your opinion, from a perspective of a financial expert, what are the reforms we need in this sector?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And since you are in a bank, I think you'll appreciate what I'm saying as well. I think the first thing is, I think the Banking Act needs reform. It's 25 years old. And when the government appointed that committee 2 years ago, one of the recommendations was actually review the Banking Act, because to me it's, I think, outdated and it needs review. And plus there are directions which have been issued from time to time also which needs review. Like for example, the share ownership. I think in order to give a boost to the share market, I think it's important that we look at the shareholding structure of banks. So that is one. Then the second thing is, I think the banks should actually support the SME sector. I think they are not doing enough, because that's the backbone of the economy. And as you know, we are very good at doing vanilla banking. Right. If you give a loan, we want 80% security by way of asset. Right? I think that needs to change if we are going to encourage innovation. I mean, people like Steve Jobs and all, and Mark Zuckerberg and all would have never made it if banks had that kind of attitude, you know. So I think the government also has to intervene and make sure that certain sectors are supported, because a lot of people are complaining that banks make too much of money, too much of profit, right? So that they should be supporting the SME sector to grow. So I think in terms of capacity building and in terms of reducing the spreads the banks have, I think these are some of the areas that we need to focus on. And I think even talent management in banks, the technology that is being used, I think all needs to be, I think somebody needs to come and disrupt. That's the time I think the banks will take note, and then hopefully they reduce the cost of operations, because finally it's the customer who is paying for it.
All right. So also, being a multi-talented and multi-skilled business personality, there's also an author in you. You are a professional writer, and you are an author of many, many books. So how has this role been?
Yeah, I think it runs in my veins. My grandfather was a published author. My mother's all three brothers have been authors. In fact, her elder brother wrote 16 books, including the famous Supreme Court of Sri Lanka. So I think it runs in my blood. And it's my passion actually. And especially when I move around, people say, I read your book. I think to me that's an accomplishment in terms of when people say, I've read your book, I like what you have said there, or I don't like what you have said here. So I think that's a passion, that's my passion, and I will continue to do. In fact, I'm working on another biography which will be released in a couple of months.
Right, so it was lovely having this conversation with you, and it was indeed a pleasure to have you on our show today. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure talking to you.
Right, with that, we will move on to a short commercial break, and we will be back with you soon. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Business Today, and now we are ready to move on to our regular stock market segment. So let's move on to the stock market segment. As usual, we have Shiraj Obesekara joining us from Colombo Stock Exchange to give a brief update on what's going on at CSE.
Good evening. It's good to be back on the show and to share an update with our viewers, hot on the heels on what has been a record-breaking week last week for the Colombo Stock Exchange, during what continues to be a record-breaking year, 2017, for the Colombo Stock Exchange in terms of foreign investment. Last week, we established a new all-time record for foreign purchases recorded in the Colombo Stock Exchange during any given year. A figure of 106 billion recorded so far in 2017 has already surpassed the previous record of 104.7 billion recorded in 2014, which is quite substantial. And such foreign purchases and foreign buying has contributed to a net foreign inflow of 17.4 billion rupees, which indicates that foreigners in 2017 have bought shares in the Sri Lankan stock market more than they have sold. This such a foreign activity continues to indicate the positive buying opportunity that we have witnessed in the market throughout 2017, and a buying opportunity that foreigners have been quick to capitalize on and have capitalized on throughout the year 2017. And we've talked about the foreign activity throughout the year on the show as well, and our viewers would come to realize that such foreign activity has now led to a new record in the highest ever foreign purchases. In terms of the market activity as well, we have some positive news in that front. A 30% increase in the daily average turnover, which is an indicator of market activity. The 946 million figure recorded for 2017 so far has improved by 30% when you compare to last year's figure of 737 million, which was recorded in 2016. And in terms of the aggregate turnover so far, which is the total turnover up to date, that figure has also already surpassed the total figure that we witnessed in 2016. So some encouraging signs there in terms of market activity picking up once again. Taking a look at both indices in the stock market, the all share price index today stands at 6,405.53, a 2.85% improvement in 2017 since the start of the year. The S&P SL20 index indicates 3,723 points, a 6.49% percentage increase in the index so far this year as well, which I'm sure is encouraging to our viewers in terms of positive market returns that we've seen so far this year. What has to be outlined is that regardless of the good foreign performance we have seen, and regardless of the positive returns that we've seen in the indices, the market continues to offer attractive valuations and for further opportunities for investors to take part in the stock market. And the best indication is the price earnings ratio, which is at 10.70, and which is fairly low compared to regional peers as well. And when you really look down into the sectors as well, you see further attractive valuations in certain sectors. The majority of sectors are actually valued below in terms of price earnings valued below 10.70, which also should indicate to our investors that there continues to be good buying opportunities in some of these sectors as well. And something that we've attempted to do a lot this year, is to create awareness on these buying opportunities among the local investors. And to that effect, we had another one of our local investor forums, the sixth of a series that we are running in collaboration with the SEC, and we had that forum in Colombo, and we did see a fair amount of interest among investors and other interested parties who attended the forum to obtain perspective on the economic outlook and also to obtain perspective on the stock market opportunities. And the key feature of this event and a key feature of this series is that it offers investors an opportunity to meet stockbrokers and also engage with stockbrokers, engage in an independent macroeconomic overview to learn more about how they can benefit from the stock market. So what we saw yesterday was all types of investors and all types of professionals attending our forum, and that is something that we've seen across the cities that we have organized such forums in, which is certainly encouraging in terms of rejuvenating local investor interests. So our viewers today, if they are interested in participating in similar forums or in other branch programs conducted around the country through the CSC branch network, they could obtain further information through the CSC website www.csc.lk, and we do have a fair amount of branch programs running through the end of the year, so there certainly is room to attend some of those. That does bring me to an end of my update for today. So just to sum up, a new record in foreign purchases recorded in any given year in 2017, and as I said earlier, attractive valuations still indicate that investors have opportunities to take part and benefit from this good performance in the stock market. Thank you and have a good night.
All right, thank you, Sharaj, for the update. And with that, we are ready to move on to our next segment. And the budget 2018 is still a hot topic among the business community, and they still wish to know more and more details on the budget proposals. So we hope to revolve our conversation around this topic today as well. And we have with us Mr. Hasita Premaratna. He's the Chief Financial Officer of Brandix, no stranger to business today. Very warm welcome to you. Right, so first of all, can you talk about the main sectors affecting that had got affected with the budget? It can be positive or negative.
Yeah, I think this time's budget, when you look at in terms of the proposals that have come out, one important and a good thing is that in general, when you look at it, it's fairly simplified and relatively less complicated. Now, that's something that most corporate sector as well as the individuals are looking for, because sometimes when the budgets do get complicated, it does leave a lot of ambiguity, and then in terms of implementing those proposals, government themselves struggles. So naturally, in the last two budgets, we saw this problem at a peak. Where complexity was quite high, but this time I think the simplicity is there. Of course, one reason was that the Inland Revenue Act was brought in September 2017, just a couple of months before the budget. So essentially all the direct tax related changes were communicated in the Inland Revenue Act. So budget didn't have too much to do on that front. So probably that was one reason. But broadly, I think that's a positive thing for all the sectors across the businesses, that the simplicity was quite high this time. On the other hand, if you look at more the impacted sectors, I think there are three main areas to talk about or to highlight. First is the banking sector. We saw the banks being charged with a transaction levy of 0.02%. So for all transactions that go across. So I think on one side, when you look at it can be seen that it's a sector that's being already taxed quite heavily. But in the meantime, from a government perspective, probably government would look at it and say there's still more profits there, and there might be, quick ways of collecting that tax, and that's been actually called a debt service levy, which means that the government, Sri Lanka, has to pay a lot of foreign debt repayments in the next 2 to 3 years. Heavy debt repayments are coming up. So with those debt repayments coming, naturally there has been some planning.
Would this be charged by its customers or from the bank's profits?
Yes. So what the government has outlined is that it should not be passed on to the customers. So this is a collection that's been done to create a fund to repay the debt of the government. and then banks are not supposed to actually pass it on to the consumer, because that leads to wrong behavior, because the behavior what we want to encourage is for people to use banking system and do transactions through the banking system rather than using cash, right? So if you put a direct transition out there and charge that to the consumer and pass on, then naturally the number of transactions in the banking system can reduce, which can be negative. So obviously, looking at that behavioral drive that tax system should bring in, government has said no, don't charge to the consumer, but banks should absorb, which means that the 20 billion rupees that this tax is supposed to collect per annum need to be going out of the banking profits technically. So banks are roughly, the banking sector profits are roughly in the range of about 120 billion rupees. So approximately about 20 to 22% of this profit will get wiped out if this tax is being taken out of the profits of the banking sector. But having said that, my view, of course, though the government says don't pass on, I'm sure that the banks will find a mechanism
to pass it on.
Yeah, pass it on ultimately to the consumer in different form, not maybe to call every transaction is tax, but maybe through the loan interest or some other mechanism. I'm sure banks will definitely have a pass on effect of this. So that's the first one, the banking sector. Second one was, which I thought was a little bit harsh, was the telecommunication sector, because every telecommunication tower that's been owned by a telecom company has to pay a 200,000 rupee per tower tax. So that's quite high when you look at the number of towers across. So it virtually is expected to collect about 13 billion rupees of taxes to the government. But having said that, that will basically wipe out the entire profitability of the telecommunication sector of the country. So that's something that's really tough. And also that the TRC, the Telecommunication Regulatory Commission, controls the pricing of our calls, our data, etc. But again, I'm sure the telecom companies will find an innovative way to pass it on. So watch out, there will be some increases in your telecommunication charges if this tax goes through the final approval from the parliament. So that's the second one. Third industry is interesting, that is shipping industry. Now, what I look at there is that we are looking at building the country as a hub for logistics. So maritime logistics is an important piece. And Hambantota port, the Colombo port developing, and Sri Lanka, consolidating its position in this one belt route with China should definitely have some, build up on that. So that means, obviously, you need to open up. So what the budget did was allowed foreigners to own 100% of a logistics company in Sri Lanka, which will help to bring big names to Sri Lanka and build faster. Having said that, it also disturbs the local investors, local already established companies' position in the market. So there's been a lot of lobbying and issues around. But I think we need to find some sort of a win-win for both parties to play and play in the sector. So these are the three key highlights. Of course, there are many, but in the interest of time, I'll leave it at that.
Right. So looking at exports, government plans to double the size of exports by 20 billion USD in 2020. So do you think the budget this time has supported this target? Has the budget given adequate incentives to go towards this growth?
Honestly, I think very ambitious target, right? And as is, if you look at the budget proposals, there is a section called Enterprise Sri Lanka, which really promotes the entrepreneurship and the SME sector, which is really the backbone of the economy. So it's very good. I mean, that's something that is long overdue, and implementation of soft loans, subsidies, and different other encouragements to these sectors is absolutely important. So I think that's the positive side, and if this is properly rolled out, we should see a drive that comes through the entrepreneurship and the SME sector, which should boost the export growth. And in the meantime, the budget as well as the government strategy works on FTAs with China, India. Of course, we have already got the GSP plus the duty benefits to Europe. So duty-free access to markets will also help drive the exports. So that's another avenue that government is pushing. But having said that, I think that the challenge would be really whether we could do certain mechanisms of operating like a hub in Sri Lanka. And I didn't see too much on the budget which covered proposals to support this hub concept and to encourage people to do a certain portion of value addition in a hub, like you make the products, semi-finished products in various other countries, say India, China, Bangladesh, Vietnam, wherever, bring it here, do a consolidation and do a limited value addition and re-export, like what Singapore does. Right. Now, if you use that model, I think 20 billion is very easy, right? But that need to be looked at from by encouraging people to get into the hub. But I didn't see too many proposals that supported that cause.
Yes, and also there's a lot of attention given this time towards a blue-green economy. How does the business community see this?
Yeah, first of all, the green is environment, blue is ocean. So when I first looked at the theme, I thought you're talking about politics.
Two parties.
Yeah, two parties, but then it was not. So green, I think, is very important. I think it's something that is very, very important for the country to embrace, because we are talking about a lot of investments coming into Sri Lanka. We see already the port city, the Hambantota harbour, industrial zones being planned together with the Chinese investments. Now, all this means that you will create more pollution. I mean, if you go around Colombo, you see that a lot of construction is going on, a lot of things are coming up, which is part of the development. So it's needed, but on the other hand, it also pollutes the environment and create damage to the environment from a longer term perspective. It's a challenge. India, if you look at many cities today, find a lot of difficulties because they haven't taken pollution seriously. So has China. So today, Sri Lanka is a much better place to live because our pollution levels are much lower. So if we want to protect in a growing environment, we have to have strong environmental regulations as well as very strong environmental behaviors of the people to support the cause. So the three things I saw mainly done: encouraging electric cars and cutting the duty on those, and of course discouraging the petrol and the hybrid vehicles by increasing the taxes on those. So more emphasis towards the electric cars will come, and we should see more and more electric cars hitting the roads in the next year or year and a half or so. In the meantime, of course, solar, which is from a power perspective to reduce the burden on the grid. For you to self-generate, there's been a lot of incentives given for you to put your own solar in your house or in your business, encouragement through soft loans and stuff like that. Apart from that, to control the damage to the environment, there's some proposal to discourage the plastic and polythene use, and alternate sources to those have been also encouraged. So these three avenues are seen in the green economy, which I thought was good, and is something that we need to embrace as a country, as citizens. But tax proposals obviously can give a drive and a push to that behavior of people to be more environmental friendly.
All right, so thank you very much for being with us today. As we are on a battle with time, we got to wind up. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, with that, we got to wrap up for today. Thank you for being with us. We will see you next week. Take care and good night.